In today's complex dating landscape, the phenomenon of simping has become a hotly debated topic, revealing stark differences in how society perceives similar behaviors based on gender. While the term simp is typically hurled as an insult toward men who demonstrate excessive devotion without reciprocation, women who exhibit identical patterns of behavior often receive praise and admiration. While the term simp is typically hurled as an insult toward men who demonstrate excessive devotion without reciprocation, women who exhibit identical patterns of behavior often receive praise and admiration. This glaring double standard isn't accidental. It stems from deep-rooted biological imperatives, centuries of social conditioning, and fundamental differences in how men and women experience attraction. By examining the psychological and evolutionary underpinnings of this phenomenon, we can understand why female simps frequently strengthen their romantic prospects through their actions, while male simps almost invariably sabotage theirs. This exploration will reveal uncomfortable truths about human mating strategies and the unchangeable nature of sexual attraction. The contemporary definition of a simp describes someone who engages in extreme acts of devotion, whether emotional, financial, or through relentless attention, in hopes of winning affection from their desired partner. However, society judges this behavior through completely different lenses, depending on whether it comes from a man or woman. When women remember their partner's favorite meals, plan elaborate surprises, or prioritize their man's needs above their own, these actions are celebrated as romantic and indicative of a caring nature. Yet when men perform equivalent behaviors, sending lavish gifts, constantly complimenting or rearranging their schedules to accommodate a woman, they're frequently derided as desperate, weak, or manipulative. This dichotomy isn't random. It's the inevitable result of evolutionary mating strategies that have shaped human psychology for millennia. From an evolutionary perspective, the stark contrast in how male and female simping is received makes perfect sense. Women, as the more selective sex due to higher reproductive costs, have evolved to be attracted to indicators of high status, confidence, and leadership in men. When a man engages in simp-like behavior, constantly seeking validation, putting a woman on a pedestal, or demonstrating excessive eagerness to please, he unconsciously broadcasts signals of low status and neediness, traits that are fundamentally unattractive in the mating market. Conversely, when women display similar devotion, it aligns perfectly with male evolutionary desires for nurturing, admiration, and care. This explains why female simps often have their behavior rewarded with commitment and affection, while male simps find themselves trapped in cycles of unreciprocated attention and growing resentment. Women who embrace simp-like behaviors, such as cooking elaborate meals for their partners, writing heartfelt letters, or consistently prioritizing their man's happiness, are typically viewed through an overwhelmingly positive lens. Society labels them as devoted, loving, and ideal partners, reinforcing the value of their efforts. Men raised on cultural narratives that equate female care with high mate value generally appreciate and reciprocate this energy because it satisfies their deep psychological need for emotional security and domestic comfort. Unlike their male counterparts, female simps strengthen their relationship prospects through their actions, as their devotion is interpreted as an enhancement of their inherent value rather than a depletion of it. This creates a virtuous cycle where their efforts yield tangible romantic rewards. The male simp operates from a fundamentally flawed premise: the belief that unwavering kindness and extreme accommodation will eventually be rewarded with romantic affection. This approach fails because it stems from a scarcity mindset that women instinctively detect and find unattractive. When a man engages in excessive simping behavior, constantly texting first, always paying for everything, never asserting his own needs, he communicates that he has no better options and is willing to accept unequal treatment. Women, whether consciously or subconsciously, interpret this as low-value behavior that suggests the man lacks the social proof and self-assurance that indicate high mate quality. Unlike female simps, whose efforts are seen as adding value to a relationship, male simps are typically perceived as attempting to purchase affection through transactional generosity, which ultimately breeds contempt rather than attraction. Centuries of social conditioning have cemented vastly different expectations for how men and women should behave in romantic contexts. Women have been culturally programmed to be nurturers and caregivers, roles that make their simp-like behaviors appear natural and commendable. When a woman goes above and beyond for her partner, she's simply fulfilling societal expectations in an exemplary fashion. However, when a man exhibits parallel behaviors, he violates fundamental tenets of traditional masculinity that emphasize emotional control, challenge, and leadership. Society expects men to be slightly mysterious, emotionally contained, and in control of the courtship process, qualities that simping directly contradicts. This explains why male simps face such harsh social judgment, while female simps receive praise for nearly identical actions. One of the most damaging aspects of male simping is how it disrupts the natural reciprocity of healthy relationships. Female simps generally experience positive reinforcement. Their efforts are appreciated and often reciprocated by partners who value their devotion. Male simps, however, frequently find themselves trapped in exploitative dynamics where their generosity is accepted but never rewarded with genuine romantic interest. Women who enjoy male attention without commitment may consciously or unconsciously string simps along, accepting gifts, emotional labor, and constant validation while offering nothing substantial in return. This creates a toxic cycle where the man, desperate for affection, doubles down on his simp behaviors in a futile attempt to earn love, while the woman's attraction diminishes further with each act of desperate devotion. Healthy romantic relationships require balanced power dynamics to thrive. When a man engages in simp behavior, he voluntarily surrenders all power in the relationship, positioning himself as an option rather than a priority. Women, evolutionarily wired to seek men of equal or higher status, instinctively lose attraction when they sense they hold all the leverage in a relationship. Female simps don't trigger this same reaction because their devotion complements rather than contradicts traditional gender dynamics. A woman's caregiving enhances her partner's life without threatening his position as the leader in the relationship, while a man's simping undermines the very qualities that make him attractive in the first place. This explains why female simps can maintain healthy relationships, while male simps struggle to command basic respect. Male simps often embody the infamous nice guy syndrome, believing that relentless kindness and self-sacrifice should automatically translate to romantic success. This approach fails because it misunderstands the nature of female attraction. Women don't choose partners based solely on how much they give, but rather on indicators of genetic quality and social status that simp behaviors actively undermine. Confidence, ambition, and self-assuredness, qualities diminished by simping, are far more attractive to women than unchecked generosity. The tragic irony is that the more a man simps, the less attractive he becomes to the very person he's trying to impress. Female simps avoid this paradox because their nurturing behaviors align with rather than contradict what men find appealing in long-term partners. Hypergamy, women's natural tendency to seek partners of equal or higher status, explains why male simping is such a disastrous strategy. Women are biologically programmed to screen for men who lead rather than follow, who challenge rather than accommodate. A man who molds himself to a woman's every whim appears directionless and lacking in the very qualities that indicate high mate value. Female simps don't face this same barrier because men evaluate potential partners through different criteria, where a woman's devotion and caregiving abilities enhance rather than diminish her attractiveness. This fundamental difference in mate selection criteria creates the double standard where female simps flourish while male simps flounder. While female simping generally yields better outcomes than male simping, it's not without potential downsides. Women who completely neglect their own needs in favor of constant accommodation risk being taken for granted by their partners. However, even in these cases, the social consequences are markedly different than for male simps. Society views female devotion as inherently virtuous, meaning that even when a woman's simping becomes excessive, she's more likely to be pitied than despised. The worst outcome a female simp typically faces is being undervalued in an otherwise stable relationship, while male simps often find themselves outright rejected and socially ridiculed. The male simp's situation is particularly dire because his behavior creates a self-reinforcing cycle of diminishing returns. The more he simps, the less respect he commands. The less respect he commands, the harder he feels compelled to simp. Women may initially enjoy the attention and validation from male simps, but this quickly gives way to boredom or even active repulsion, as they recognize the lack of self-respect underlying the behavior. Unlike female simps, who are often cherished for their care, male simps are frequently mocked both by the objects of their affection and by society at large. This creates a nearly inescapable trap where the simp's very efforts to gain affection ensure he never receives it. There exists a rare exception that proves the rule. When a high-status man, whether through wealth, fame, or exceptional physical attractiveness, engages in simp-like behavior, it's often romanticized rather than ridiculed. Celebrities who write love songs or make grand romantic gestures are applauded rather than derided. However, this exception only highlights the fundamental truth. It's not the behaviors themselves that are judged, but the perceived value of the person demonstrating them. For average men, identical actions are seen as cringeworthy and desperate because they lack the social status to make such behaviors appear charming rather than needy. Many women claim to want a nice guy in abstract terms, but their actual behavior reveals a different truth. When confronted with genuine male simps, women often report feeling uncomfortable, pressured, or even repulsed. The constant attention and accommodation that male simps provide registers not as charming but as clingy, emotionally draining, or even manipulative, as if the man is attempting to purchase affection through relentless giving. This creates a no-win situation where the man's very efforts to prove his worth ensure he's never valued. Female simps rarely face this same perception because men interpret nurturing behavior through a completely different psychological framework. Men's reactions to female simps stand in stark contrast to how women view male simps. Rather than feeling repelled by female devotion, men typically appreciate and often reciprocate these efforts. This difference stems from fundamental variations in what men and women seek in partners. Where women value challenge and status, men value support and admiration. A woman's simping behaviors align perfectly with male desires for loyalty and domestic comfort, creating a dynamic where her efforts are far more likely to be rewarded with commitment and affection. This explains why female simps can maintain successful relationships, while male simps struggle to achieve even basic romantic success. For men who recognize their own simp tendencies, breaking the cycle requires radical self-reassessment. First, they must develop genuine self-worth independent of female validation, pursuing personal goals, hobbies, and social connections that provide fulfillment outside romantic contexts. Second, they need to establish firm boundaries rather than engaging in endless accommodation, understanding that healthy relationships require mutual effort rather than unilateral sacrifice. Finally, they must reframe their understanding of attraction, recognizing that confidence and self-respect are infinitely more appealing to women than desperate attempts to please. While challenging, this transformation represents the only path out of the simp trap. Women who invest heavily in their partners often find these efforts rewarded with long-term commitment. This occurs because their behaviors align perfectly with male psychological needs for loyalty, domestic support, and admiration. Unlike male simps, whose devotion undermines their attractiveness, female simps enhance their relationship prospects through their actions. This explains why women can successfully use simping behaviors to secure and maintain relationships, while men who attempt the same strategy typically achieve the opposite of their intended results. The uncomfortable reality is that attraction isn't fair. It operates according to primal, often unconscious rules that modern social narratives can't override. Female simping works because it triggers protective, appreciative responses in men that align with evolutionary mating strategies. Male simping fails because it activates women's aversion to low-status behavior that suggests poor genetic quality. These patterns aren't matters of personal preference, but deeply ingrained biological responses that no amount of wishful thinking can change. Recognizing this truth is the first step toward developing genuinely effective romantic strategies. The brutal reality is that male simps cannot succeed in the romantic marketplace not because of societal unfairness, but because their very behavior negates the qualities women find attractive. Women fundamentally cannot respect men who simp, as respect requires the perception of strength and independence that simping directly contradicts. No amount of gifts, compliments, or accommodations can overcome this biological reality. The male simp's path leads only to frustration and humiliation, as each act of devotion further erodes the slim chance he might have had for genuine connection. Only by rejecting the simp mentality entirely can men hope to achieve romantic success. The simp double standard exists because men and women are psychologically wired to value different traits in partners, shaped by millions of years of evolutionary pressures. Female simps thrive because their behavior aligns with male desires for care and loyalty, while male simps fail because their actions contradict fundamental female attraction triggers. The key lesson is clear romantic success comes not from desperate attempts to please, but from developing genuine confidence and self-worth. For men trapped in simp cycles, the only way out is through complete transformation, replacing needy accommodation with authentic self-assurance. Only then can they escape the trap that ensures simps never win.